The ongoing labor dispute between educators and the Ontario government continues this week. Some elementary students will miss 2 days of school due to strikes. Some high school students will miss 1 day. So far, it's all trending in the wrong direction. Is there any good news or even a little bit of progress in sight? Let's find out from Laura Stone, reporter in the Globe and Mail's Queen's Park Bureau, and Martin Regg, Cohn, the Toronto Star's Ontario politics columnist. Thanks, you two, for being here. And we'll just deal with the throat, right? We'll just move along.
Okay,
things have escalated from where they were. Why now?
Well, I think we have to look at the context heading into this whole period of negotiations. We had, previous to this, Education Minister Stephen Lecce, Lisa Thompson in the role, and by all accounts, including from members of her own government, she wasn't the strongest fit. So heading into these negotiations, she talked about class sizes making kids more resilient. She muddied the waters around full-day kindergarten. And of course, the big one that everyone is talking about is the wage cap, the 1% public sector wage cap, which the government imposed heading into these teacher negotiations. So we all knew it was going to be hot. And this isn't the first time that teacher negotiations have gotten a little dirty. So I think that's the context, and the Ford government is having some difficulties in as some would say, some critics would say, in getting the public on their side during these difficult negotiations, and that's because everyone knows a teacher. People have teachers in their families, including myself, and so. If you have kids, obviously you have experience with teachers. So I'm not saying that either side is right in this, but it was always going to be a pretty dangerous dispute.
Having said that, the teachers have been in a legal strike position for a very long time, and they haven't gone there. They have gone for these much lesser measures. Why do you think?
Well, I think the teachers' unions in general have been picking their spots, trying not to pick a fight at every opportunity. Laura's right. This has been going on for a long time. What's different, to your question, is that they haven't gone anywhere. Hence, the pressure tactics have escalated.
The negotiations haven't gone
They're deadlocked. The bargaining is stalled.
The government would dispute that, right? The government would say, we've come down in our online course requirements. We've come down in average class size. They think they've moved.
Sure, yeah, and they expect gratitude from the teachers for having come up with an outrageous offer of going from 22 to 28 students in the class, and going from 0 to 4 mandatory online courses. Now they've cut that in half. So they're saying, please say thank you. Well, if Laura Stone punches me in the nose and then gives me some tissue for my bleeding nose, I'm not going to, and says, well, thank you, please.
Which has never happened,
just for the record.
Not yet. So just because they have pulled back on their clawbacks doesn't mean they didn't booby trap the bargaining table to explode. They came up with a preemptive 1% cap on salaries, which we can talk about later. They boosted the class sizes, and they came up with this 4 mandatory online courses. We're all online. We're all journalists. We're all pretending to be digital. But 4 mandatory courses, one size fits all. Crazy. Never tried anywhere in North America. So they've scaled that back, which means they never thought it through in the first place.
Well, let me pluck one of the things out of your list. You said full-day kindergarten was mused about, right? Once upon a time, about whether or not they wanted to, because apparently we've got the Cadillac. We've got the Cadillac plan in place, and perhaps if you're trying to balance the books, you want to go to a Chevy model. Having said that, do you think there is an ironclad commitment from the province of Ontario today to keep it the way it is that is satisfactory to the teacher unions, the teachers, the parents, the students, et cetera?
I don't know if it's satisfactory to the unions, but I think the government has been pretty clear now in terms of wanting to maintain the current model. They released a letter publicly saying that they were going to keep this. When you speak with officials from Stephen Lecce's office, they say this will not be messed with. I think if it were to be, the public backlash against it would be so strong.
Because people like it.
People like it, and I don't think this is kind of a hallmark of our education system. So I don't think that this is something that the Ford government is going to try to exploit. That said, the unions have still suggested, the elementary teachers union has still suggested that they want this within the agreement as opposed to a policy. But I think that the government recognizes that it would be quite risky to do so.
That opens up a whole can of worms for a whole bunch of other stuff, I presume.
I mean, they have to fight an election in 2 years, and do they want to fight it on eradicating full-day kindergarten or changing the current model? I'm not so sure that is in their best interest.
Okay, per your recommendation, let's pick up on the 1% thing.
Okay.
The law of the province of Ontario is that all public sector settlements are capped at 1%. Why should the teachers be exempt from that?
Because it makes no sense for anybody, let alone teachers. 1% sounds like a reasonable offer, except we've been down that road before. In 2012-13, when the Dalton McGuinty government, backed by the Progressive Conservatives and minority government, said, you know what, we're in an economic crisis. We've had a huge economic downturn. People are losing their jobs. Unemployment is about 7.6%. Remember, way back when? So you've got job security. How about you take a bit of a haircut this year and have a salary freeze of 0 after having some good years? Teachers protested and they won in court because it was illegal. It was unlawful what the government did.
Well, they won in court after it was all said and done and McGuinty was out. So the initial battle was won.
But a teacher might say we should learn a lesson from that, right? And fast forward to 2020, and we are not, by any measure, in an economic crisis. Unemployment is south of 6%. It's at levels not seen for decades. Mr. Ford, our premier, keeps boasting about job creation of about 250,000 new jobs since he took power. Just all his doing. Let's give him credit for that, for the sake of argument. Why then are we imposing a 1% freeze when private sector settlements in this province are at 2.1%?
You've asked the question. Here, I will happily provide the
Devil's
answer.
advocate.
Because devil's advocate. Because the people who sign the checks at Queen's Park, the finance minister and the Treasury Board president, say it's $1.5 billion extra dollars over the course of an agreement to give the teachers 2 instead of 1. Okay, there's your reason.
Yeah, because there's a lot of teachers in this province. There's 140,000 teachers.
Yeah.
So why would we ask teachers to say, because there's so many of you and you do such good work, and because you get decent salaries, you should take a pay freeze that nobody else in this province has because we don't want to raise taxes for people, because we want to give hydro subsidies that are costing $4 billion a year, because we want to do other things. You know, you got to make decisions in politics, in government. And I can't think of a reason that I would say to plumbers, you know, my furnace just blew out a few weeks ago. I can't imagine saying to the plumber, you know, you cost too much money. I'd like to say that, but that would not help me get the installation done. So you have to pay them a fair wage.
Do I assume that the Education Minister, Stephen Lecce, has had meetings with finance officials and he understands what his limitations are in terms of a settlement, which is why he's sticking to 1% right now?
Well, this was imposed before Stephen Lecce began his negotiations, or his team did. This was a move by the Treasury Board President Peter Bethlenfalvy. I think the government has tapped into something here in terms of limiting the salary increases. And again, I'm not for or against anything, but I think the public sentiment, if we would look at some of the polling that's been done, and just the way that the workforce is going now, I think that people look at that and look at how teachers are paid, you know, the kind of benefits and perks that they do get, while respecting and recognizing the hard work that they do, see this as a relatively fair offer. I mean, you know, for younger generations especially, to work in one job for 30 or 40 years, receive a good solid pension, have good solid hours, and get a pretty significant amount of vacation is kind of the dream. And this old school mentality, I would say, from some of the unions, that it's expected and in fact should be increased. I'm not quite sure if that vibes with you know, the current public sentiment out there.
Well, actually, we do know, because you had some numbers in the paper this morning, and you do know, based on that polling, that the public is not on side. The largest chunk of the public is not on side for a 2% salary increase for teachers. Go ahead, give the numbers. You've got them right there.
It's actually split. I've cribbed. I'm cheating. I've got my crib sheet here from today's paper. You can buy the Toronto Star if you want the full details.
We don't run commercials on TV, Martin.
But the people are split. So if you ask about salaries, people will actually say that $93,000, which is the average salary for teachers, 44% said it was about the right amount. 37% felt it was too high. 8% said it was too low. So they're actually split on salaries. Now,
Not
you can
split
play
evenly, though. I
No.
mean, that's...
Well, 44% thought it was the right amount.
Right. And
37 thought it was too high. But 8% said it was too low. So add 8 and 44, you've got 52%, my math, saying it's okay. So it's split. And all I'm saying is, look, the salary issue is not actually the major issue at the table. There are other issues like class sizes, kindergarten, special ed, and other elements. But I just think the government booby-trapped the table by putting this in ahead of negotiations and said, we're going to squeeze you at a time of economic prosperity, low unemployment. You're taking a haircut. And you may think teachers get too much money.
Give the other numbers. Give the other numbers there, which are what percentage of the public is in favor of a 2% salary increase versus a 1% salary increase. That's in the piece as well. And the majority of people do not agree with the 2% salary increase for teachers.
Usually Sheldon has this up on your screen for you, so I'm happy to play the role of your control room. But I invite you to read the paper and look at it closely. That is exactly what the number says. 44% said it was the right amount. It was framed as, oh, people are more in favor, more behind the teachers. Maybe that's the confusion. People are 100%, I exaggerate. A majority are behind the teachers on class sizes and on mandatory online courses.
Yes,
a strong majority oppose that. But on the actual percentage increases, there's some confusion. It's roughly a split between the two.
Laura.
I think what's interesting is that the government has sort of obviously handicapped itself a little bit here because, well, correct me if I'm wrong, they can increase, but they would have to do it for all of the unions if they did go above and beyond that 1%. So from a public's perspective, they want this done with. They don't want to hear about this anymore, and we can see that there doesn't appear to be an end in sight right now, and this is probably only going to escalate to, who knows what. So if the government had allowed itself to give 1.1%, 1.2%, 1.3%, would that have made that much of a difference in terms of the public's perception of this? Would they still be viewed as fiscal stewards of the economy? And, have they kind of boxed themselves into a corner a little bit by capping it at the 1%?
Well, but then if you give the teachers more than 1%, then you're inviting every other public sector union to say, wait, you did it for them, why don't you do it for us?
Yeah, and it's not going to happen. To be clear, the government's not going to cave on the 1%.
You think they're stuck on that one?
Oh, yeah. But, and then the teachers have already filed lawsuits. They're gone to court. So this will be not particularly be fought in the court of public opinion. The salary component will be fought in the law courts, and I rarely make public predictions, but on this one, I'm going to predict that the teachers will win eventually. And so we will end up paying later instead of paying today. There's another alternative, which is that the government might later, not soon, legislate them back to work. If they do...
Hold off on that, because we're going to come to that later. I wonder if in these numbers, Laura, there is the makings of a potential settlement, in as much as if the government wants to stick hard to its 1%, which it seems to have some public support for, might it yield even more on the online mandatory course offerings and on the class size, which public sentiment is not with them on, and there's the deal. What do you think?
I think they could, but they don't seem to be showing a desire to back down right now. They backed down pretty quickly on those two issues heading into the negotiations. So it does beg the question: did they start out too high, knowing that they would have to bring that down? I think it is interesting, kind of the divide, the split between the high school teachers and the elementary. A lot of the issues that we're talking about, class sizes, e-learning, only impact high school teachers who are being quite strategic in their job action. They didn't strike during exams, for instance. They are still participating in extracurriculars, whereas the elementary students union, when you look to what are the issues that are holding that up, I think it's less clear that the public is on side with some of those changes.
And that's an important point that Laura makes. We in the media tended to lump them all together, the teachers' unions. There's 4 of them. But there is a difference between the elementary teachers in the public system, ETFO, and the secondary school and Catholic teachers. For one thing, I got my kids' report cards last night, and there were marks in the column because these kids are in high school, my 2. If you're in elementary school, you're not getting, in Toronto, you're not getting report cards. And there's nothing more important to a parent.
You're getting marks, but are you getting comments?
Not for elementary school. You're not getting any because they are not transmitting the marks. They're not entering them in the system. They're saying to the principals, here, you do hundreds of thousands of marks. So that to me was an escalation that was disproportionate to the issues at hand. I mean, what's keeping the high school teachers and the government apart are issues that people can understand, as we say in journalism. Class sizes and online classes. In the elementary system, it's a lot more down in the weeds. It's about hiring, it's about seniority, it's about special ed, which is important. But the major issue that EDFO, the elementary union, has gotten bogged down on is hiring and seniority. And they're making it into this big question of principle. And I would argue that the public would not be on side with the idea that only teachers with the greatest seniority can be considered the top. They have a system where you have 5 qualified teachers with the most seniority are the only pool that you can hire from, and not merit-based necessarily. They're supposed to be qualified. But what if a principal who wants to hire, who's in a school with a large population that's diverse in the city, and what if all 5 of those people on that pool of applicants are white? Can they not hire a young Black or Indigenous teacher? I guess not, if the person doesn't have the most seniority.
Do you want to follow up on that, Laura, the issue of merit versus seniority and how big an issue, a sticking point that is in these negotiations?
Well, it seems to be quite a large sticking issue because we know that the elementary teachers union actually made it back to the table, which is something that the high school teachers haven't done in more than 2 months. And they're so far apart on these issues that the mediator doesn't even see a point of bringing them together. So the elementary teachers we know they did agree on 3 to 4 issues. We don't know specifically what those were, but according to the union leaders, the talks did break down because of this merit-based hiring and other issues. I agree that it is the kind of thing that I don't think you're going to win over the public speaking about how teachers are hired or seniority and how we're going to, preface who's able to teach a class. But the flip side of that is the union's membership, I think, is strongly behind this. And so it's almost that the unions and the government are both playing to their base on this issue. And the unions have their argument as to why they want this in place, which is that it prevents nepotism and other things from principals, choosing people that they may be related to or know or favor, as opposed to what the unions would say are the most qualified teachers. So it's an interesting issue. Is it enough to hold up a deal? I'm not sure.
And just quickly on Laura's point, though, this is not the government versus the big bad. This is not the union and the teachers against the big bad Tory government. This is the union against the principals and the school boards. It's the school boards and the principals who want more flexibility. And this clause, by the way, wasn't of 5 teachers with the most seniority. It was only inserted in 2012-13. It's relatively new. 2012-13, that's when the government was freezing, applying the screws to teachers. So they gave them this little concession. It's not really some high question of principle.
The unions want seniority as opposed to quote-unquote merit because they say, as you pointed out, this takes away the opportunity for principals to show favoritism or hire friends or family or whatever. Do we know if there's actually any evidence in the school system that that's what principals do when they fill these vacancies?
I don't know. I mean, I guess that was something that back in 2012 was brought forward. I believe it was first by the Catholic school teachers as to a major issue. I think you're kind of seeing both sides play into this. I mean, we had the education minister out the other day saying that phys ed teachers are hired to teach math as a result of this clause. I don't know that there's any evidence to show for that either. So it's kind of one of those really in the weeds topics that I'm not sure is really resonating.
And elementary school teachers, by the way, have also withdrawn all extracurricular activities. So team sports, clubs,
trips to Quebec
gay
City,
straight alliances, field trips. The other unions haven't done that.
Yeah.
So you have to ask yourself, really, does that make sense? Because it's never, ever has extracurricular applied any leverage to any contract negotiations. So can we please stop doing that?
It also has the highest impact, of course. When your high school kids stay home, they can generally stay home on their own and play video games, which is probably what most of them are doing during these rotating strikes. For younger kids, parents have to worry about childcare. They have to maybe take time off work. They have to rearrange their lives and schedules. So, this has a lot of impact and could potentially be quite a big nuisance for parents if this continues to escalate.
Now, mind you, in the elementary panel, the government has offered to pay the childcare fees of people who have to go out and hire babysitters or do that kind of thing. And a lot of people have availed themselves of that. Not the majority, I think, who were eligible to, but a lot of people have. Has that had an impact on public opinion at all?
I think the government thought it would turn to their advantage politically. I don't think their motives are especially pure on this. I think it's an attempt to try to make the union look bad and make themselves look good. I think it's kind of a wash. I'm not sure. I think it's not really. It's a Band-Aid. It's not really the answer. And let's just solve this problem.
Okay. Well, all right. Let's just solve it, you say, and that's going to get us in our remaining moments here to the bottom line. How does this end, Laura?
Well, a lot of people are looking to back to work legislation, and that is not, if that does happen, that's not going to happen for quite some time because it has to become much more of an extreme situation. The school year has to be in jeopardy. It has to be viewed as more of an emergency. So the House is returning next week. We'll see if this job action ramps up, but that could potentially be an end result of this, unless the elementary teachers union starts to feel the heat from the parents, feel the heat from the public, and they're willing to go back to the table and negotiate with the government again.
I wonder, Martin, I know one of the reasons that governments in the past have been nervous about back-to-work legislation is that it sends the dispute off to an arbitrator who almost certainly will give the teachers more than the 1% the government is offering. Can the government change the rules around arbitration to say, back-to-work legislation, you're going back to work, we're going to an arbitrator, but we're telling the arbitrator 1% is the maximum he or she is allowed to offer. Is that doable?
They can try, and they probably will. And others have tried. People have been talking about how to make an arbitrator do what the government wants it to do and take into accountability to pay. But even if you ask the arbitrator, okay, don't just give them the unlimited amounts. You must take into account the government's ability to pay. Well, the government still has a significant ability to pay. It could, in fact, raise taxes a little bit. It could do other things to create a bigger pool of money. But almost certainly, an arbitrator, one way or another, will give more than 1%, or the courts will, because it will offend natural justice. Now, this government has done all kinds of things to try to tweak things to its advantage, like threatening to use the notwithstanding clause in the Charter of Rights. So who knows what the Premier has in mind? But to your question, how will this end? I don't think the government really knows. I think they had this idea that they could just control the game and arrange the table to their advantage. But I don't think they really thought through their end game, how this would all turn out. So I think they thought Mike Harris taught the teachers a lesson, and we're going to do the same thing. And I don't think Doug Ford and Mike Harris are in the same position in terms of popularity, in terms of strategy, in terms of understanding the public's mood.
That's the last word on this one. We should remind our viewers the head of the Catholic Teachers Association will be here on Thursday to take our questions on these and other matters. And with that, we thank Martin Regg Cohn from the Toronto Star and Laura Stone from the Globe and Mail for coming into TVO tonight and helping us out with this. Thanks much, you two.
Thank you.
Thanks, Steve.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is brought to you by the Chartered Professional Accountants of Ontario. CPA Ontario is a regulator, an educator, a thought leader, and an advocate. We protect the public. We advance our profession. We guide our CPAs. We are CPA Ontario. And by viewers like you. Thank you.